her! Please, you gotta help her, man. She can't breathe.
It was a black SUV right there. It went that way. A black SUV.
All right, take a breath for me. Hands down.
She's
You're
bleeding.
okay.
I swear. She just dropped. There's nothing out here.
Let me see what EMS is on the way. Stay
Black
with me.
SUV.
Stay right here.
No plate.
I already told you everything. The way it happened, the way it didn't. Doesn't change anything. It was quiet before you came in. It's still gonna be quiet after. You don't sound sorry. Not sure I know what that feels like.
My little brother, he was only 12. I used to walk him to the bus every morning, and he'd always say, "See you after practice." I didn't think one day would be the last time. He deserved to grow up. He deserved to be here. And I need everyone.
This reconstruction draws from how these incidents are typically documented, reviewed, and investigated after the fact. Names and identifying details reflect public records from the July 2023 investigation. On July 28, 2023, the high desert silence of Cuesta, New Mexico, was pierced by a 911 call that sounded like a random act of urban terror. 13-year-old Amber Archuleta lay dying on a dirt road, her face shattered by a point-blank shot. Standing over her were the only 3 witnesses to the horror: her 16-year-old brother, Frankie, her 14-year-old girlfriend, Kiana, and their 14-year-old friend, Porfirio Brown. At first, the story was ironclad. The teens claimed they were victims of a senseless drive-by shooting. They told officers a black SUV had slowed down, opened fire, and vanished into the horizon. It was a narrative designed to trigger an immediate manhunt, sending police racing away from the house and toward the highway. But for the lead investigators, something felt wrong from the very first second. The authority figure at the center of this initial investigation was 14-year-old Porfirio Brown. Despite his age, his demeanor was chillingly calm. He stood by as officers performed frantic CPR on Amber, his hands deep in his pockets, repeating the black SUV script with mechanical precision. But as detectives began to sweep the area for evidence, the tragedy began to look like a meticulously staged execution. The first crack in the story wasn't a word. It was the ground itself. In a drive-by shooting, the evidence is predictable: shattered glass, skid marks, and brass shell casings scattered on the asphalt. But on this stretch of road in Cuesta, the dirt was undisturbed. There was no glass. There were no tire tracks. And most importantly, there was no blood where the teens claimed Amber had fallen. Instead, investigators noticed a heavy, dark trail leading away from the public road and toward the back door of the Brown residence, a bright red house that seemed to be hiding a dark interior. As the sun beat down on the scene, the accidental nature of the event began to evaporate. Detectives noted that Porfirio's father, William Brown, arrived shortly after the shooting and immediately backed his son's story, despite not being there when the trigger was pulled. The consistency was too perfect. It felt coached. It felt like a family protecting its own at the cost of a 13-year-old girl's life. Before we reveal what was found behind the doors of that red house, I have to ask you, if you were an officer on a scene where every witness told the exact same story, would you follow the lead, or would you trust your gut that something was missing? Justice for Amber depends on uncovering the truth that was mopped up before the police arrived. If you believe in holding those in power accountable, even when that power is just the owner of a house full of secrets, hit that subscribe button and stay with us. The investigation was about to take a turn that no one saw coming. As Amber was tragically pronounced deceased, her brother Frankie, crushed by the weight of the lie, approached a detective with a trembling voice. He didn't just change his story, he pointed a finger directly at the person standing right next to him. Narration. With Frankie's whispered confession, the drive-by illusion didn't just crumble, it vanished. The investigation shifted from a manhunt for a ghost vehicle to a forensic siege of the Brown residence. But as detectives moved to secure the home, they were met by William Brown, a father who seemed more concerned with the sanctity of his front door than the life that had just been lost inside it. The tension on that porch was thick enough to feel. William stood his ground, demanding warrants and citing legal representation, while just feet away, The evidence of a cover-up was literally drying into the floorboards. But the detectives weren't moving. They knew that every second they were kept outside was a second the primary suspect had to dispose of a weapon or scrub a surface. When investigators finally forced entry, the scenic family home was revealed to be a death trap. This wasn't just a house. It was an unsecured armory. As the search began, the sheer volume of weaponry was staggering. In the master bedroom alone, detectives found a cache of firearms that would make a small militia blush. There were handguns lying on nightstands, rifles leaning against closets, and boxes of high-caliber ammunition scattered on the floor as if they were nothing more than dirty laundry. In total, 8 firearms were recovered. Not one was in a safe. Not one had a trigger lock. In a house where a 14-year-old was left unsupervised, the tools for a tragedy were lying out in plain sight, fully loaded and ready for a finger to find the trigger. While the ballistics team cataloged the guns, the forensic units began to spray luminol, a chemical that makes even the most invisible traces of blood glow a haunting neon blue. Despite the teens' frantic attempts to mop the floors with tissues and scraps of carpet, the house began to light up like a map of the crime. The kitchen was the epicenter. The glow revealed a massive saturation point where Amber had likely fallen. From there, a bright blue trail of smears and heavy droplets led through the living room, across the hallway, and out toward the dumpster. It was clear Amber Archuleta hadn't been shot by a passing car. She had been shot in the heart of this home, and then, while she was still fighting for air, she had been dragged like a piece of trash out to the road to satisfy a lie. But as the evidence mounted, a major procedural problem emerged. Among the 8 guns recovered, the murder weapon was missing. Kiana, Amber's girlfriend, had finally broken. In a recorded interview, she described the weapon in terrifying detail. A revolver with a spinning barrel. She recounted how Porfirio had been joking around, pointing the gun at Amber's face. She described Amber reaching up to push the barrel away, an instinctive move of self-preservation that ended in a flash of light and a boom that would haunt Kiana forever. Yet, that revolver was nowhere to be found. In the 30 minutes between the shot and the arrival of the police, someone had been very busy. The spinning barrel gun had been whisked away, hidden so effectively that not even a statewide search could locate it. This missing link was the first step toward a legal catastrophe. Without the specific gun that fired the fatal round, the prosecution was left with a house of secrets, but no smoking gun. If a parent leaves 8 loaded guns around a 14-year-old, should they be charged with the murder their child commits? This question would go on to define the trial of William Brown. The sun was setting over the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, and the orange glow on the red house was no longer scenic. It was ominous. The case had reached its point of no return. The drive-by lie had been officially incinerated by forensic evidence, and the legal gears were shifting from a murder investigation into something much more systemic. This was the, and now that mistake is costing him everything moment. Because in New Mexico, the law doesn't just look at the person who pulls the trigger. It looks at the person who provided the weapon. As the detectives confronted William Brown on his porch, a specific legal mechanism was triggered. Benny's Law. Named after another New Mexico child lost to a preventable shooting. This law makes it a crime to leave a firearm in a location where a minor can access it. By leaving 8 guns unsecured, William hadn't just been messing around with his hobbies. He had created a state-level violation that automatically escalated the jurisdiction of the case. The moment the police saw those loaded handguns on the nightstands, William Brown's status changed from witness to defendant. His career, his reputation, and his freedom were now on the line because of a pattern of negligence that investigators soon discovered went back years. But the real transformation happened when one of the first responders on the scene recognized the family. It turned out this wasn't just a random house in a rural village. Through a shocking twist of fate, a first responder, the cousin of Frankie and Amber's mother, was one of the first to arrive. This individual knew the history. They knew that Joshua Archuleta, the father of the victim, had expressed concerns about guns in the past. This personal connection shattered the professional distance of the scene. It became personal. It became a community tragedy where the people supposed to protect the children were the ones who had enabled the danger. Just as Porfirio was being led away in handcuffs, the defense team began planting the seeds of a theory that would eventually derail the entire case. They pointed to a brief moment captured during the initial chaos. A moment where Frankie Archuleta, the brother who had just lost his sister, was seen hugging Porfirio. The defense asked, if Porfirio had just murdered Amber, why would her brother embrace him? This question turned the investigation on its head. Was it possible that Frankie was the one playing with the gun? Had the teens made a suicide pact of silence to protect one of their own? The absence of the spinning barrel revolver became a gaping hole in the narrative. If Frankie had hidden the gun to protect his friend, or himself, the prosecution's case for second-degree murder was in jeopardy. Under the pressure of a formal interrogation, Kiana finally gave the detectives the missing piece of the timeline. She revealed that after the shot, while Amber was still alive and gasping for air, the priority wasn't calling 911. The priority was the stage. They took Amber from the kitchen, through the house, and out to the road. They mopped. They hid the revolver. They coordinated the black SUV story. It was a cold, calculated attempt to rewrite reality while a 13-year-old girl took her final breaths. Does the fact that the brother hugged the suspect make you doubt Porfirio's guilt? Or was it just a sign of shock? Let us know your theory in the comments. The investigation was over, but the nightmare for the Archuleta family was just beginning. As the case moved into the courtroom, the consequences cascade began to wash over everyone involved. What started as a clear-cut case of shooting inside a home was about to be dismantled by the very thing that makes the American legal system so complex: the burden of proof. With the spinning barrel revolver still missing, the prosecution was forced to build a murder case on the shifting sands of teenage testimony. And in the high-stakes environment of a New Mexico courtroom, he said, she said, was a dangerous game to play. The defense team for Porfirio Brown didn't just defend their client. They went on the offensive. They utilized the compromised crime scene to their absolute advantage. Because the first responders were so focused on saving Amber, as they should have been, the house wasn't immediately cordoned off. People had moved freely. Evidence could have been planted, moved, or destroyed by anyone. Then came the Hail Mary that shocked the community. The defense suggested that it wasn't Porfirio who pulled the trigger, but Amber's own brother, Frankie. They pointed to the lack of forensic evidence linking the specific fatal bullet to any of the 8 guns found. You have a messy crime scene, a missing weapon, and 2 boys who were best friends. Can you say, beyond a reasonable doubt, who was holding that gun? Or are we just picking the boy whose father has the most guns? While Porfirio faced the murder charge, his father, William Brown, stood trial for violating Benny's law. This was supposed to be the landmark moment for gun safety in New Mexico. The prosecution presented the photos of the 8 unsecured weapons. They showed the jury the nightstand guns, the loaded rifles, and the ammunition scattered like candy. But William Brown's defense was built on a technicality that left the courtroom breathless. They argued that since the state couldn't prove which gun killed Amber, they couldn't prove that it was one of his guns. Even though he had an arsenal of unsecured weapons, the defense claimed that for Benny's law to apply, the state had to link the specific fatal firearm to the defendant. It was a legal loophole you could drive a truck through. The community watched in horror as the consequences cascade slowed to a crawl. The financial devastation for the Browns was immense. Legal fees were mounting into the hundreds of thousands, but the criminal accountability was slipping away. As the proceedings dragged on, the systemic failures of the investigation came to light. The fact that the other 2 teens were allowed to go home before a full forensic sweep of their clothing was conducted meant that gunshot residue, GSR, tests were virtually useless. The messy crime scene wasn't just a headline. It was the reason the truth was becoming impossible to pin down. The Archuleta family sat in the gallery day after day, forced to listen to a defense team blame their son for their daughter's death, all while the man who owned the house of guns looked on with a stoic, unmoving expression. If a crime scene is compromised by police trying to save a life, should that be enough to let a suspect go free? Tell us where you stand on this legal dilemma. A mistrial, a plea deal for tampering, and a community left in an uproar. We'll look at where the players are now and the chilling reality that the murder weapon in Amber Archuleta's death is still out there, somewhere in the New Mexico desert. The legal battle for Amber Archuleta didn't end with a bang. It ended with the hollow sound of a gavel falling on a compromise. In the end, the House of Secrets proved too dark for the light of the law to penetrate. The cascade of consequences that many hoped would result in life sentences instead dissolved into a series of legal technicalities and shattered expectations. The trial of Porfirio Brown, the boy many believed executed his friend in cold blood, ended in a mistrial. The jury, paralyzed by the messy crime scene and the defense's redirection of blame toward Amber's brother, could not reach a unanimous verdict. The state, realizing their case was bleeding out without the murder weapon, was forced to take a deal. Porfirio Brown pleaded guilty to 1 count of tampering with evidence. For the act of moving Amber's body, mopping up her blood, and participating in the black SUV lie, he was sentenced to just 1 year of probation. At 15 years old, he walked out of the courtroom with his future intact, while Amber remained in the ground. But the biggest shock was yet to come. William Brown, the man who provided the environment for this tragedy, stood before a jury for violating Benny's law. Despite the 8 unsecured guns, despite the ammunition on nightstands, the jury returned a verdict that sent shockwaves through New Mexico. Not guilty. The legal loophole had held. Because the specific revolver used in the shooting was never found, the jury felt they couldn't technically prove William had made that specific gun accessible to his son. The law, in its rigid adherence to the letter over the spirit, allowed the owner of the House of Guns to walk away a free man. The fallout from this case has left the village of Cuesta permanently scarred. The Archuleta family was left not just with the loss of a daughter, but with the public blame cast upon their son by a desperate defense team. To this day, the question remains, where is the gun? Somewhere in the vast, rugged terrain surrounding the Brown residence, the spinning barrel revolver lies hidden. It is the final piece of the puzzle, the only witness that can't be coached or silenced. Until it is found, the absolute truth of what happened in that kitchen remains a secret shared only by 3 teenagers. 1 who is dead, and 2 who have moved on. The case of Amber Archuleta has become a rallying cry for legislative reform. It exposed the technicality trap in gun storage laws and highlighted how a compromised crime scene can become a sanctuary for the guilty. While William and Porfirio Brown avoided prison, they could not avoid the social destruction of their reputation. The Red House stands as a grim landmark, a reminder of what happens when negligence meets a joking finger on a trigger. This story is a haunting reminder that the law and justice are not always the same thing. If the law says someone is not guilty because a weapon was hidden too well, is that a failure of the police or a failure of the law itself? We want to hear from you. Should Benny's law be changed so that any unsecured gun in a house where a shooting occurs leads to an automatic conviction? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. We read every one of them. If you want to support our mission of bringing accountability to light and ensuring victims like Amber are never forgotten, please subscribe and share this video. Every view is a step toward making sure the next House of Secrets is exposed before the trigger is pulled.